Some people mistake silence for weakness, right up until the moment silence takes the highest seat in the room. The courthouse in Richmond, Virginia woke slowly under a gray Monday sky, its marble steps damp from an early morning mist and its tall columns standing like old witnesses to secrets no one wanted to name. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed over polished floors while lawyers hurried past with leather briefcases, clerks balanced stacks of files, and deputies traded low jokes near the metal detectors. It looked like justice. It sounded like order. But anyone who had spent enough time in the building knew appearances were the first lie a courthouse ever told. At exactly 8:17 a.m., a woman in a charcoal coat stepped through the front doors carrying a slim black folder tucked close to her side. She moved with quiet confidence, not flashy, not loud, not trying to be noticed. She was in her early 40s, composed, elegant in the kind of way that never needed approval, her natural curls pinned neatly back, her posture straight as if the weight of the room could not bend her. Some glanced at her and then looked away. Others stared a little longer, trying to place why she seemed familiar. She gave no sign she noticed either one. Her name was Elena Brooks, though no one near the entrance bothered to ask. Officer Daniel Mercer did what he usually did when uncertainty entered his line of sight. He turned it into authority. Mercer was 6'2", broad-shouldered, polished badge, pressed uniform, and the kind of expression that said he believed every room improved when he entered it. He saw Elena approaching the courtroom hallway reserved for judges, attorneys, and authorized staff. He stepped in front of her with one palm raised. "Hold it right there." Conversations nearby softened. Elena stopped. She met his eyes calmly. "Good morning," she said. "I need to get through." Mercer smirked as if courtesy from her sounded offensive. "No, you need credentials." He looked her up and down in a slow dismissive glance. "This area isn't open to the public." Elena's voice stayed even. "I understand the rules." "Do you?" he asked, louder now. A few people slowed their pace to watch. "Because people walk in here every day acting like they belong somewhere they don't." She did not move. She did not raise her voice. She simply said, "If you'll step aside, we can avoid delaying the docket." The phrase made a clerk at the far desk glance up sharply. Mercer laughed. "Delaying the docket?" He looked toward another deputy. "You hear that?" The second officer, Ryan Cole, grinned and leaned against the wall. Mercer stepped closer, invading the space between them. "Lady, I don't know who you think you are." Then with one careless motion meant more to humiliate than harm, he struck the folder from her hands and brushed the side of her face as he shoved her backward. The folder slid across the polished floor, papers still neatly inside. A gasp moved through the hallway and then disappeared into the silence that always arrives when people decide witnessing is safer than speaking. Elena steadied herself without stumbling. One hand rose slowly to the corner of her mouth where the sting had landed. She looked at the officer, then at the folder on the floor, then back at him. No anger. No panic. No scene. Just stillness so complete it unsettled even Ryan Cole for half a second. Mercer mistook that stillness for surrender. "That's what I thought," he said. "Now turn around and head back downstairs." Elena bent, picked up the folder, brushed a single speck of dust from its edge, and straightened her coat. Then, to everyone's confusion, she smiled. Not warmly. Not bitterly. Just knowingly. Across the hall, courtroom clerk Nancy Reed had gone pale. Her eyes were fixed not on Elena's face, but on the silver seal embossed on the folder now resting in her hands. Before Nancy could speak, a side door flew open. A bailiff rushed out, breathless, scanning the corridor in alarm. "Where is Judge Brooks?" he called. "Court starts in 60 seconds. The hallway forgot how to breathe. Officer Daniel Mercer stood frozen with one hand still half raised, as if authority itself had suddenly abandoned him mid-gesture. Ryan Cole straightened from the wall so quickly he nearly lost his footing. Clerk Nancy Reed lowered the stack of files in her arms and stared at Elena Brooks with the look of someone watching a locked door swing open by itself. The bailiff, Thomas Wade, saw her immediately. Relief crossed his face, followed by concern when he noticed the tension in the corridor. "Your Honor," he said, voice dropping with respect. "We are ready whenever you are." No one moved. No one spoke. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder than the people. Elena adjusted the sleeve of her charcoal coat and turned her eyes toward Mercer. It was not anger he saw there. Anger would have been easier. What he saw was disappointment so calm it felt heavier than shouting ever could. "Officer Mercer," she said softly, "you have delayed this court by 1 minute and 14 seconds. Ryan Cole swallowed hard. Mercer tried to recover the swagger that had carried him through years of unchecked certainty. "There has been a misunderstanding," he said, words suddenly formal. "If I had known," that sentence, Elena replied, contains the problem. She stepped past him. No one blocked her path now. Her heels moved across the marble floor in steady measured clicks that echoed down the hallway like a countdown. Thomas Wade opened the courtroom doors wide. "All rise," he called. Inside, attorneys stood from their tables. Spectators rose from wooden benches. A prosecutor halfway through organizing exhibits nearly dropped a binder when he saw who entered. Elena Brooks walked straight to the bench, set her black folder down, and removed her coat with unhurried grace. Beneath it was a navy judicial robe waiting on the back of the chair. She slipped it on as naturally as sunrise. Then she Saturday. The room obeyed before she spoke. Mercer remained outside the doorway, unable to decide whether to enter or disappear. Nancy Reed approached him carefully. "You should stand down," she whispered. "Now." He did not answer. He was staring at the woman he had just treated like an inconvenience. Inside the courtroom, Elena opened the folder. The silver seal on the cover caught the overhead light. "Be seated," she said. Chairs lowered in a wave. The sound was small but final. She glanced at the docket. First matter of the morning, Commonwealth versus Harris. Then she paused. "Before we begin, there is an administrative issue requiring immediate attention." Every eye lifted. Even the attorneys leaned forward. Elena looked toward the open doors. "Officer Mercer and Officer Cole will enter this courtroom." Ryan Cole stepped in at once, face pale. Mercer followed slower, each step stripped of the confidence he wore so easily minutes earlier. They stopped before the bench. Elena folded her hands. "State your names for the record." "Officer Ryan Cole," Ryan said quickly. "Daniel Mercer," he muttered. "Louder," Elena said. "This court values clarity." "Officer Daniel Mercer." The room was silent enough to hear papers settle. Elena nodded once. "Thank you." This morning, in a public hallway, both officers engaged in conduct beneath the standards of this building and far beneath the standards of law enforcement. Since both of you now stand where every citizen eventually stands, let us begin with a simple lesson. Mercer's jaw tightened. "Your Honor, I can explain." "You will have an opportunity," Elena said. "For the first time today, you will wait your turn." A murmur rolled through the gallery and died instantly. She turned to the clerk. "Ms. Reed, secure the surveillance footage from hallway C, timestamp 8:15 through 8:25. Nancy's hands trembled as she wrote. "Yes, Your Honor." Elena's gaze returned to Mercer. "You believed no one important was watching. That assumption has ended." The words hung over the courtroom like a storm cloud that had finally found the right building. Officer Daniel Mercer felt every eye on him now, not the admiring glances he once enjoyed, but the cold attention reserved for people whose certainty had cracked in public. Ryan Cole kept his hands folded in front of him, shoulders stiff, as if stillness alone might make him invisible. Judge Elena Brooks did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Real authority had a way of lowering the volume of everyone else. She looked toward the gallery, where citizens, attorneys, reporters, and courthouse staff sat in complete silence. "This court will proceed in order," she said. "But order begins with truth." She nodded once to Clerk Nancy. Read. Play the footage. Nancy inserted a drive into the courtroom monitor with trembling fingers. A screen descended beside the bench. Grainy security video filled the room. The hallway appeared from above, time-stamped 8:17 a.m. There was Elena entering with her folder in hand. There was Mercer stepping in front of her. There was the dismissive gesture, the careless shove of papers, the smug posture that had looked so powerful only minutes earlier. Without sound, the scene somehow felt louder. Several people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. One older attorney removed his glasses and rubbed his face. Ryan Cole lowered his eyes. Mercer stared straight ahead, jaw clenched so tightly the muscles flickered. The footage ended. Elena let the blank screen remain for 3 long seconds. "Officer Mercer," she said, "did this video misrepresent your conduct in any way?" He cleared his throat. "No, Your Honor." "Did it omit context that would justify your behavior?" "No, Your Honor." "Did I threaten you?" "No, Your Honor." "Did I refuse lawful instruction?" "No, Your Honor." Each answer seemed to reduce him by an inch. Elena folded her hands. "Then the record is clear." She turned slightly toward Ryan Cole. "Officer Cole, when you observed misconduct by a fellow officer, what action did you take?" Ryan swallowed. "None, Your Honor." "Why?" He hesitated too long. "I did not think it was my place." Elena nodded once, but there was no comfort in it. That sentence has damaged institutions for generations. A murmur rose and vanished. She looked across the courtroom benches, meeting faces one by one. Many people believe injustice survives through loud cruelty. Often it survives through quiet permission. The words landed harder than anger could have. In the second row, a young law student straightened in his seat as if something inside him had been called by name. At counsel table, the prosecutor who had arrived expecting an ordinary docket now scribbled notes he knew he would remember for years. Elena returned her attention to the officers. This courthouse is not a stage for ego. It is not a hallway for humiliation. It is not a place where uniforms decide who deserves dignity. Mercer's voice came smaller now. "Your Honor, I made a mistake." "Yes," Elena said. "But let us be precise. A mistake is misfiling a document, misreading a calendar, calling the wrong case number. What happened this morning was a choice." The gallery fell deeper into silence. Even the heating vent seemed to pause. Mercer looked as though he wanted to argue, then realized argument required ground beneath him and he had none left. Elena lifted a page from her folder. "For the record, I was scheduled to preside over today's docket, review courthouse conduct complaints at noon, and meet with departmental supervisors at 2 o'clock. She set the page down. "That schedule has changed." Nancy Reed looked up sharply. Ryan Cole closed his eyes for a moment. Mercer finally understood what was coming and the color drained from his face. Elena's gaze remained steady. "Because after what I witnessed in this building, the most urgent case on today's calendar is no longer Commonwealth versus Harris." She reached for the gavel, resting her hand lightly upon it. "It is the culture that allowed this morning to happen." Judge Elena Brooks rested her fingertips on the gavel but did not strike it. The room was already under control. Sometimes power announced itself with noise. Sometimes it arrived so completely that sound became unnecessary. She looked from one side of the courtroom to the other, taking in jurors waiting in the hall, attorneys clutching files, deputies near the rear doors, citizens who had come for traffic hearings and small claims disputes only to witness something much larger. "Every person in this room came here expecting a legal proceeding," she said. What they received was a lesson in character. No one shifted now. No one whispered. Even those who had entered late stood motionless along the back wall. Elena turned to Clerk Nancy Reed. "Call Internal Affairs and the Office of Professional Standards. Request immediate presence in courtroom 3. Nancy blinked once, then nodded rapidly and reached for the phone. Her voice shook as she delivered the message. Officer Daniel Mercer took a half step forward. Your Honor, with respect, this can be handled privately. Elena's eyes met his. That suggestion arrives late. A few people lowered their gaze to hide their reaction. Mercer tried again. I have served this city for 12 years. Then 12 years should have taught you restraint, Elena replied. Length of service is not the same as quality of service. Ryan Cole stood beside him, pale and silent. Elena shifted toward him. Officer Cole, did you ever report misconduct involving Officer Mercer before today? Ryan hesitated, then answered in a voice barely above a whisper. No, Your Honor. Were there prior incidents? He closed his eyes briefly. Yes, Your Honor. A wave of tension moved through the gallery. Mercer turned sharply toward him. Watch yourself. Elena lifted one finger. You will not intimidate anyone in this courtroom again. Mercer froze. It was the first command all morning he obeyed instantly. Elena looked toward the benches where ordinary citizens sat shoulder to shoulder. Many people lose faith in institutions one small moment at a time, she said. A laugh at the wrong joke. A silence after the wrong act. A rule enforced differently depending on who stands before it. Her voice remained calm, but the words landed with the force of truth finally spoken aloud. In the third row, an elderly man removed his hat and held it against his chest. Near the aisle, a young mother pulled her son a little closer as if wanting him to hear every word. Nancy Reed ended the call and nodded toward the bench. They are on their way, Your Honor. 5 minutes. Elena checked the courtroom clock. We will use them wisely. She opened her folder again and withdrew several pages. Officer Mercer, over the last 18 months, 7 citizen complaints were filed regarding discourtesy, selective enforcement, or demeaning conduct. None resulted in formal discipline. Do you dispute that? Mercer's confidence had thinned into something brittle. Complaints are common. So is rain, Elena said. Patterns still matter. She set the pages down. Officer Cole, 2 of those complaints listed you as present. Ryan's shoulders dropped. Yes, Your Honor. And still you said nothing. He stared at the floor. Yes, Your Honor. Elena let the silence teach what words no longer could. Then the rear doors opened. 2 investigators in dark suits entered carrying tablets and identification badges. They moved quickly but without drama. The entire room tracked them like a tide turning. Nancy Reed guided them forward. Elena addressed them from the bench. Thank you for coming promptly. Preserve all footage from Hallway C, collect statements from present personnel, and relieve both officers of courthouse duty pending review. Mercer's face drained of color. You cannot do this over one misunderstanding. Elena finally lifted the gavel and gave a single measured strike. The crack echoed through wood and marble like a line being drawn. No, Officer Mercer, she said. This is being done because too many people called the same thing a misunderstanding for too long. The single strike of the gavel still seemed to vibrate in the walls when the investigators approached the officers. They were professional, calm, and efficient, the kind of people who did not need raised voices because procedure already carried enough weight. One investigator, a gray-haired woman named Karen Holt, addressed Daniel Mercer first. Officer Mercer, please surrender your courthouse access card and remain available for questioning. Mercer stared at her as if the sentence had been spoken in another language. For years he had watched consequences arrive for other people. He had never imagined hearing them directed at himself. This is ridiculous, he said, forcing a laugh that found no allies in the room. I was doing my job. Karen Holt held out her hand without emotion. Your access card, sir. The pause that followed felt longer than it was. Then Mercer unclipped the card from his belt and placed it in her palm. It sounded small when it landed, but everyone heard it. Beside him, Ryan Cole surrendered his own credentials without being asked twice. Judge Elena Brooks observed the exchange with steady eyes. No triumph. No cruelty. Justice did not need revenge to be effective. Both officers will wait in the conference room adjacent to this courtroom, she said. They will not contact witnesses, supervisors, or one another until interviews are complete. Ryan nodded immediately. Mercer said nothing. He was learning that silence feels different when it is no longer chosen. As the investigators escorted them toward the side door, several citizens in the gallery shifted to watch. A woman who had come for a landlord dispute shook her head slowly. An older veteran in a denim jacket whispered, "About time," to no one in particular. The side door closed, and with it, something in the room seemed to unclench. Elena turned back to the docket. "We will now proceed with the business people actually came here for." A faint ripple of surprised laughter moved through the benches, quickly softened by relief. Even tension can break politely when given permission. She called the first case. Commonwealth vs. Harris. A young man in a borrowed tie rose beside his public defender, clearly expecting delay, confusion, maybe another day of being forgotten. Instead, Elena listened carefully, asked precise questions, reviewed the file herself, and discovered a clerical error that had kept him under unnecessary restrictions for 3 extra weeks. "Correct the record immediately," she ordered. "Mr. Harris is free to go pending the revised hearing date." The young man blinked twice as if freedom required confirmation. Then he whispered, "Thank you, Your Honor." Elena nodded once. Beyond time next month. More cases followed. A grandmother fighting an insurance denial. A delivery driver disputing an improper citation. A nurse requesting protection from a fraudulent contractor. One by one, Elena moved through them with discipline and fairness, proving something many had forgotten: justice can be firm without being cold. Between cases, Clerk Nancy Reed leaned closer to the bench. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "people from other courtrooms are asking if they can observe." Elena glanced at the crowded gallery now filling every bench. If they can stand quietly, they may enter. Within minutes, lawyers from upstairs, deputies from other halls, interns, clerks, and even janitorial staff lined the back wall. Word had traveled faster than elevators. Not because officers had been removed, but because someone in power had refused to pretend nothing happened. During a brief recess, Nancy hesitated before speaking again. "Your Honor, I should have said something in the hallway." Elena closed the file in front of her. "Then say something next time." Nancy's eyes filled, but she nodded. "I will." "Good," Elena replied. Courage improves with use. The courtroom doors opened once more. Karen Holt returned, carrying a tablet and a sealed envelope. Her expression was sharper now. She approached the bench and spoke in a low voice. Elena listened without interruption. When Karen finished, the judge's gaze shifted toward the side conference room where Mercer waited. The room sensed the change instantly. Elena placed one hand on the envelope, then looked out over the packed gallery. "We will take the next matter before this court," she said. "And it concerns conduct far beyond this morning." The packed courtroom leaned forward before anyone was told to. People can sense when ordinary trouble is about to become something larger. Judge Elena Brooks broke the seal on the envelope and removed 3 documents clipped together with precise neatness. She read them once in silence, then set them flat on the bench. Her face did not change, but the room felt it anyway. "Bring Officer Mercer back into the courtroom," she said. The side door opened moments later. Daniel Mercer entered with less swagger than when he had left, tie loosened, shoulders tense, eyes scanning the benches now crowded with strangers who knew his name for all the wrong reasons. Ryan Cole followed behind him, subdued and pale. Karen Holt remained near the rail, tablet in hand. Elena motioned for the officers to stand before the bench once more. "Officer Mercer," she said, "during the preliminary review of this morning's incident, investigators expanded their search to prior complaints associated with your badge number." Mercer forced a thin smile. "Complaints are not findings." "That is true," Elena replied. "Patterns are more informative." She lifted the first document. 3 separate citizens reported being denied entry to public areas of this courthouse despite valid appointments. She lifted the second. 2 employees described demeaning remarks regarding appearance and background. She lifted the third. 1 deputy reported retaliation after objecting to your conduct. A murmur rolled through the gallery. Mercer looked toward the crowd as if disbelief from them might save him. It did not. Those are allegations, he said. Then let us discuss facts, Elena answered. She nodded to Karen Holt. The investigator tapped her tablet, and the courtroom monitor lit again. This time it showed hallway footage from previous weeks. Different days. Different clothes. Same posture. Mercer blocking doors. Mercer dismissing visitors with visible irritation. Mercer leaning close to a maintenance worker until the man backed away. No sound was needed. Repetition spoke clearly enough. Ryan Cole stared at the floor as if he had seen it all before. Elena let the final clip freeze on screen. Officer Cole, she said, were you present during multiple incidents shown here? Yes, Your Honor. Did you report any of them? No, Your Honor. Why not? Ryan's voice shook. Because I thought nothing would happen. The answer traveled through the room like cold air. Elena nodded slowly. And that belief is how misconduct grows old enough to feel normal. In the third row, a woman in a business suit wiped her eyes. Near the back, a courthouse custodian crossed his arms and looked away, the expression of someone who had long ago stopped expecting anyone to listen. Mercer's tone sharpened. You are turning this into a spectacle. Elena's gaze met his without effort. No, Officer Mercer. The spectacle was believing public power could be used privately without consequence. She turned to Nancy Reed. Read the notice into the record. Nancy stood, voice steadier than before. Pending full administrative review, Officer Daniel Mercer is suspended from courthouse duty effective immediately. Firearm and access privileges within this facility are revoked. Additional disciplinary referral has been submitted to the department. She swallowed and continued. Officer Ryan Cole is placed on administrative leave pending cooperation review and failure to report misconduct. Ryan closed his eyes. Mercer took one stunned breath. You cannot end a career over this. Elena rested her hands on the bench. Careers are rarely ended by one morning. They are ended by many mornings no one stopped. Silence followed, deep and complete. Even the reporters in the back forgot to write for a moment. Mercer looked around the room that had once bent around his presence. No one looked back with fear. Karen Holt stepped forward. Officer Mercer, please surrender department property remaining on your person. With slow mechanical motions, he removed the final symbols he had trusted too much and placed them in her hand. The sound of metal on wood was quiet. Yet it carried farther than any shout ever had. Elena gave one measured strike of the gavel. Next matter. And the room understood that justice was most powerful when it continued its work without pausing to admire itself. The courtroom settled into a new kind of quiet after Daniel Mercer was led away. It was not the tense silence of fear that had filled the building earlier that morning. It was the silence that follows a storm when people step outside and realize the sky can clear after all. Judge Elena Brooks reviewed the next file placed before her, then looked up at the crowded benches where no one seemed eager to leave. Cases had been resolved, rulings had been made, yet the room remained full. People were no longer there for their own disputes. They were there because something rare had happened in public. Accountability had not whispered. It had spoken clearly. Elena glanced toward Clerk Nancy Reed. How many matters remain on today's docket? Nancy checked the stack. 16 scheduled, Your Honor. 8 still waiting. Elena nodded. Then let us honor their time. The next case involved a father seeking emergency visitation with his daughter after months of paperwork delays. He stood nervously in a wrinkled button-down shirt, hat twisting in his hands. Elena listened carefully, reviewed the dates, and discovered that 2 continuances had been granted without proper notice to him. That ends today, she said. She set a hearing within 72 hours and ordered both parties present. The man's shoulders shook, as relief found somewhere to land. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank your daughter by showing up prepared, Elena replied. A few smiles moved through the room. The next matter was an elderly woman fighting an unlawful towing fee that had grown larger each week through penalties she could not pay. Elena examined the record, noted missing signatures, and dismissed the balance entirely. The woman covered her mouth and began to cry quietly. Elena handed her a tissue box from the bench without changing expression. Drive safely, she said. Laughter, warm and brief, rippled across the gallery. One by one, cases that had been trapped in delay, confusion, or indifference were given something they had long been denied: attention. Elena asked direct questions. She demanded clear answers. She corrected careless filings and refused rehearsed excuses. People who had arrived expecting another exhausting day found themselves standing straighter when their names were called. In the back row, a young intern whispered to another, "I did not know court could feel like this." Near the aisle, the courthouse custodian who had watched everything since morning nodded once as if confirming a private truth. During a short recess, Nancy Reed approached the bench carrying coffee. "Black, no sugar," she said softly. Elena accepted it with a small nod. "Thank you, Ms. Reed." Nancy hesitated. "I used to think keeping my head down was professionalism." Elena took one sip. "Sometimes it is fear wearing a nicer coat." Nancy absorbed the words slowly. "I understand now." "Good," Elena said. "Understanding is expensive. Use it." When court resumed, Karen Holt returned with updated findings and placed another folder beside the bench. Elena read the summary in silence. Additional witnesses had come forward. Prior complaints once ignored were being reopened. Supervisors were requesting interviews. The building itself seemed to be exhaling old secrets. She closed the folder and looked toward the gallery. "For those present today," she said, "let this be clear. Respect is not a favor granted by authority. It is the minimum owed by it." Pens moved quickly among the reporters in the back. Several deputies standing along the wall shifted uncomfortably, then stood straighter. Elena called the final matter of the afternoon, a teenager facing misdemeanor charges for missing a court date after unreliable bus service and 2 part-time jobs. She reviewed the circumstances, waived the penalty, and arranged community service through a scholarship mentorship program instead of punishment that would follow him for years. The young man looked stunned. "You are giving me another chance." Elena met his eyes. "No. I am recognizing the first one you were never properly given." The room grew still again, but this time it was reverence, not tension. Outside the high courthouse windows, the grey morning had broken into late afternoon sun, casting long gold lines across the wooden floor. And for the first time that day, the building looked worthy of the word carved above its entrance. By late afternoon, courtroom 3 had become the most crowded room in the building. Word had spread through stairwells, break rooms, clerk offices, and parking garages. People who usually hurried past one another now stood shoulder to shoulder beneath the same fluorescent lights, waiting to see whether the morning had been a moment or the beginning of something larger. Judge Elena Brooks finished the final scheduled case, signed the order, and handed the file to Nancy Reed. "That concludes today's docket," she said. No one moved. They sensed she was not finished. Elena looked across the benches filled with citizens, lawyers, deputies, interns, janitors, reporters, and staff members who had spent years learning which truths were safe to say aloud and which ones were better swallowed. "Before this court adjourns," she said, "there is one final matter." The room straightened as one body. Karen Holt stepped forward from the side aisle carrying another folder, thicker than the first 2. She placed it on the bench and nodded once. Elena opened it carefully. Inside were witness statements gathered over the last several hours, archived complaints, supervisor emails, and recommendations already moving through channels that once moved too slowly. She read in silence while the room waited. Then she closed the folder and lifted her eyes. This morning exposed individual conduct, she said. This afternoon exposed institutional tolerance. Several heads lowered. Others rose higher. Both require correction. She turned toward the rear wall where courthouse deputies stood at attention. Effective immediately, all courthouse security staff assigned to public access points will complete retraining in professional conduct, equal treatment, and de-escalation standards before returning to duty. Pens moved quickly in the reporter's row. Elena continued. Complaint procedures will be posted at every entrance in plain language. Body camera retention periods for courthouse interactions will be extended. Anonymous reporting channels will be expanded. Supervisory review will no longer be optional. The words were administrative, but they landed like thunder because systems rarely change in front of witnesses. Nancy Reed blinked rapidly, then stood a little taller behind the clerk desk. A young deputy near the wall exhaled as if he had been holding breath for years. Elena's gaze shifted to the gallery. To the public, she said, do not confuse access with dignity. Access lets you enter a building. Dignity determines how you are treated once inside. In the second row, the elderly woman whose towing fees had been dismissed pressed one hand to her chest. The father seeking visitation squeezed his daughter's photo in his wallet. The teenager granted a second chance stared at the bench as if memorizing what fairness looked like. The side door opened quietly. Daniel Mercer was escorted through the rear corridor by investigators carrying boxed personal effects. He was not brought before the bench. He simply passed the open doorway for one brief visible moment. Gone was the polished certainty, the practiced smirk, the easy belief that uniforms could substitute for character. Several people noticed him. No one jeered. No one applauded. Consequences did not need an audience. Elena saw the movement in the doorway but did not turn her head. Some people think accountability is humiliation, she said. It is not. Humiliation is what power does when it feels untouchable. Accountability is what happens when it learns it was mistaken. Even the reporters paused before writing that down. Sunlight from the west windows stretched farther across the courtroom floor, turning old wood amber. Dust moved through the beams like tiny things finally visible. Karen Holt leaned toward Nancy and whispered that 3 more employees had requested to file statements before leaving for the day. Nancy nodded with quiet resolve. Elena gathered the files into a neat stack. This courthouse belongs to every lawful person who enters it, she said. Not to badges. Not to titles. Not to fear. She reached for the gavel. The room seemed to lean in one last time. Court is adjourned. The strike echoed clean and sharp through marble, wood, and memory. Then something unexpected happened. No one rushed for the exits. They rose slowly, respectfully, as if leaving a place they had just seen become what it was always supposed to be. The courthouse emptied slowly, as if people were reluctant to break the spell of a day that had restored something many of them thought was gone for good. Hallways that usually echoed with impatience now carried softer voices, thoughtful voices, the sound of strangers discussing fairness as if it were something real again. Outside, the late Virginia sun washed the marble steps in gold, and clusters of people lingered near the entrance long after their business had ended. Some spoke in hushed amazement. Others simply stood there, looking back at the building with new eyes. Inside chambers, Judge Elena Brooks removed her robe and hung it neatly behind the door. The room was modest, lined with law books, framed certificates, and a single photograph of her parents standing in front of a small brick church years ago. She loosened the tension in her shoulders and sat for the first time all day. Nancy Reed knocked gently before entering with 2 paper cups of coffee. I guessed you might still be here, she said. Elena accepted one with a faint smile. I usually am. Nancy hesitated near the desk. May I ask you something? You just did, Elena replied. Nancy laughed nervously, then gathered herself. How did you stay so calm this morning? Elena looked at the steam rising from the cup. Because anger was expected of me, she said. Calmness was useful. Nancy considered that for a long moment. "I have worked here 9 years," she said quietly. "I have seen people treated differently. I told myself it was not my place." Elena's gaze softened, though her posture remained straight. Many people wait for permission to do what conscience already asked of them. Nancy lowered her eyes. "I should have spoken sooner." "Then speak sooner next time," Elena said. "Regret is only valuable when it becomes instruction." Nancy nodded, steadier now than she had been that morning. She placed a small stack of envelopes on the desk. These came in already. Notes from staff. 2 resignation letters from supervisors. 3 requests to volunteer for the policy committee. Elena glanced at them and exhaled slowly. Change, when it finally starts, often arrives all at once. Down the hall, a maintenance worker paused outside chambers, then knocked with rough knuckles. He introduced himself as Samuel Ortiz, 22 years in the building, mostly unseen by those who depended on his work. He held his cap in both hands. "I just wanted to say thank you, Your Honor," he said. "Some of us notice things for a long time. We just thought nobody important wanted to hear it." Elena stood and walked around the desk to shake his hand. "Mr. Ortiz," she said, "the people who notice truth first are often called unimportant by those who fear it." His eyes shined, and he nodded once before leaving. As evening settled, reporters gathered outside requesting statements, but Elena declined them all. She had no interest in becoming the story. The story was the standard. In a small conference room on the first floor, investigators continued interviews late into the night. Doors once closed by habit were now opening by necessity. Across town, Daniel Mercer sat alone in a quiet apartment where the television flickered unanswered in the corner. For the first time in years, there was no badge on the counter, no uniform to hang, no easy shield between himself and reflection. Some reckonings arrive with noise. Others arrive when the room gets quiet enough to hear. "Yourself clearly." Back in chambers, Elena gathered her files, switched off the lamp, and stepped into the dim hallway. The courthouse after hours felt different, less like a fortress and more like a promise still under construction. She paused beneath the carved words above the interior archway, "Equal justice under law." Then she walked toward the exit as the lights clicked off behind her one row at a time. Tomorrow would bring new cases, new failures, new chances. It always did. But something had changed that no order could fully capture. People who witnessed today would remember it whenever silence asked for their cooperation. And long after names were forgotten, one truth would remain: borrowed power can command a room for a moment, but earned authority can change it for years.